Imagine standing in the middle of the Vatican. You are surrounded by the ancient stone of St. Peter's Square. You walk up the marble steps, and suddenly, everyone turns. Walking toward you is the Pope, but you are not there for a sermon. You are there because the Vatican has convened the greatest scientific minds in the world. The topic? Not theology, but biotechnology, the future of medicine, the end of disease. It sounds like the start of a Dan Brown novel, doesn't it? But this actually happened to Tony Robbins, and it is the opening hook of the book we are diving into today. Welcome to the show.
Okay, hold on. You have to admit, that is a wild image. Tony Robbins, the guy I know for firewalking and shouting about unleashing the giant within, hanging out with the Pope to discuss stem cells? It feels like a fever dream. I came into this expecting a self-help book about positive thinking, but I have been reading through this, and it is thick with hard science. It is co-authored by Peter Diamandis and Robert Hariri. These are heavy hitters in the tech and medical world. So, Sarah, is this just billionaires trying to live forever, or is there something here for the rest of us?
It is a valid question, Alex. While the authors definitely have access to treatments that cost a fortune, the core premise of Life Force is about a fundamental shift in how we view healthcare. We are moving from what they call sick care, where we wait until you are broken to fix you, to true healthcare, which is precise, predictive, and preventative. The book argues that we are on the edge of a revolution. We are transitioning from Medicine 2 to Medicine 3. And the driving force? It is not just money. It is information. Biology has become an information technology. And just like your phone gets cheaper and faster every year, these medical breakthroughs are dropping in price exponentially.
I like the sound of things getting cheaper. But let's get specific. The book starts with Tony's own story, and I have to say, it sounds painful. He talks about an accident that basically wrecked his shoulder and spine. He was in so much pain, he rated it a 9.9 out of 10. Doctors told him his career was over unless he had surgery that might leave him unable to lift his arm. That is a terrifying spot to be in.
It was pivotal. Tony refused to accept that prognosis. He went looking for alternatives and stumbled upon the world of stem cells. This is our first deep dive today. Stem cells are the body's repair kit. Think of them like a general contractor for a house. When you are young, you have millions of them. They rush to an injury, and they can turn into whatever cell is needed: a muscle cell, a bone cell, a nerve cell. But here is the catch. As we age, our stem cell supply exhausts. It is called stem cell exhaustion. By the time we are 80, we might have 1,000 times fewer active stem cells than when we were teenagers.
So Tony's internal contractors were on strike, or just retired. He ended up going to Panama for treatment. That is the part that always makes me nervous. Medical tourism. Why did he have to leave the U.S.? Is this stuff illegal?
It is not illegal to have the cells, but the regulations in the U.S. regarding how you can grow and expand stem cells are very strict. In Panama, he was able to get a specific type of stem cell derived from umbilical cords. These are day zero cells. They are brand new, robust, and haven't been exposed to aging or toxins. Tony claims that after the treatment, not only did his shoulder heal without surgery, but his spinal pain, which he had had for 14 years, vanished. It sounds like a miracle. But biologically, it is about reducing inflammation and signaling the body to repair itself. The stem cells do not just become new tissue, they act like signal flares, calling your body's own resources to the site of the injury.
Okay, so stem cells are the repair crew, but the book makes a big deal about catching problems before you even need a repair crew. They talk about diagnostics. I am usually of the mindset that if it is not broken, do not fix it. I do not want to go looking for trouble. But these guys seem obsessed with testing.
That is the ostrich approach, Alex. But think about it this way. If there was a monster in your house, would you rather find it when it is the size of a mouse, or wait until it is the size of Godzilla? The book introduces us to the concept of the liquid biopsy. There is a test called GRAIL. It is a simple blood draw, but it uses advanced computing to look for fragments of DNA that dead cancer cells shed into the blood. It can detect over 50 types of cancer, many of them at stage 0 or stage 1, long before you would feel a lump or have symptoms.
50 types? That is impressive. I admit, finding a mouse is better than fighting Godzilla. They also mention heart disease. I have a family history there. My grandfather dropped dead of a heart attack, and he looked perfectly healthy the day before. The book talks about a new way to scan the heart that isn't just a standard angiogram. It uses AI?
Yes, it is called a CCTA scan, enhanced by a company called Clearly. Here is the difference. A normal stress test or angiogram looks for narrowed arteries, but arteries usually only narrow when the disease is very advanced. The AI scan looks for the plaque itself, specifically the soft, vulnerable plaque that can burst and cause a clot. That soft plaque is the widowmaker. The AI can strip away the layers of the image and show you exactly what is building up in your vessel walls years before a blockage happens. It turns a sudden heart attack into a manageable, preventable condition.
Preventable. That is the key word. Moving on, the book takes a turn into what I consider the real sci-fi stuff. Aging itself. Not just getting sick, but the actual process of getting old. They interview this guy, David Sinclair from Harvard. He says aging is a disease. That implies it can be cured. Isn't that a bit arrogant? Death and taxes, Sarah. You cannot escape them.
It is bold, for sure, but Sinclair's theory is fascinating. He calls it the information theory of aging. Imagine your DNA is like a CD or a DVD. Remember those? The music is the digital code. That is your genome. It never changes. But over time, the disc gets scratched. The scratches prevent the laser from reading the music correctly. That is the epigenome. The epigenome tells the genes when to switch on and off. As we age, due to UV rays, bad food, and stress, the epigenome gets confused. It loses the information. Skin cells forget they are skin cells and start acting old and useless. Sinclair believes we can polish the scratch. We can reboot the software.
And how do we polish this biological CD? Do we need Windex, or is it something more expensive?
He focuses on a molecule called NAD+. NAD+ is critical for cellular energy. It is the fuel for a group of proteins called sirtuins. Sirtuins are the defenders of the genome. They repair DNA and regulate the epigenome. The problem is, by the time you are middle-aged, your NAD levels drop by half. Your defenders run out of fuel. Sinclair suggests that boosting NAD levels through precursors like NMN can wake up those sirtuins. In his lab, he has turned old mice into young mice. They run faster, their organs heal, their fur gets shiny. He calls them his Benjamin Button mice.
Mice are great, but I am not a mouse. Though, I wouldn't mind running faster. Let's shift gears to part 2 of the book, the heroes. This is where the stories got really intense. I want to talk about Martine Rothblatt. Her story blew my mind. She started Sirius satellite radio, made a fortune, and then her daughter got sick with a fatal lung disease. So what does she do? She essentially invents a cure. That is a level of parenting intensity I can barely comprehend.
Martine is a force of nature. Her daughter, Genesis, had pulmonary hypertension. There was no cure. Martine didn't have a medical background. She was a lawyer and entrepreneur. She went to the library, learned the biology, found a shelved drug that Glaxo had given up on, bought the patent, and developed it. It saved her daughter's life. But she didn't stop there. She realized that eventually, people need new lungs, and there are not enough organ donors. So she is now pioneering 2 insane technologies. One is EVLP, basically keeping a lung alive and breathing inside a box so it can be repaired before transplant. And the second? Pig organs.
Pig organs. This is where I start to get skeptical again. Our bodies reject splinters. How are we going to accept a pig heart?
Gene editing. They use a technology called CRISPR to go into the pig's DNA and snip out the specific genes that cause the human immune system to attack. They create what they call a humanized pig. It sounds like science fiction, but they are already doing successful transplants in primates, and the first human trials are happening. The goal is to have an unlimited supply of organs. Imagine, Alex. No waiting lists. No one dying because a kidney didn't become available in time. Just on-demand organs. Martine calls it making death optional for organ failure.
Making death optional. That is a heavy phrase. Speaking of editing genes, let's talk about the kids. There is a story in the book about a boy who was going blind. And they fixed it, not with glasses, but by injecting a virus into his eye.
Yes, Christian Gardino. He had a genetic mutation that meant his retina couldn't process light properly. He was legally blind. The treatment is called Luxturna. It is a form of gene therapy. They take a benign virus, hollow it out so it cannot make you sick, and stuff it with the correct version of the gene Christian was missing. They inject it into the eye. The virus acts like a delivery truck. It enters the retinal cells and drops off the correct DNA. The cells start reading the new instructions and, for the first time, producing the protein needed to see. Christian went from needing a cane to navigating the world, seeing the moon, seeing his parents' faces. He even competed on America's Got Talent.
That is incredible. It really is rewriting the code of life. But what about when the code goes wrong in a different way? Like cancer. Cancer is smart. It hides. The book talks about CAR T cells. This sounded like a military operation happening inside the blood.
It is exactly that. Dr. Carl June is the hero here. His wife died of cancer, and he vowed to find a better way than chemotherapy, which basically poisons the whole body to kill the tumor. CAR T stands for chimeric antigen receptor. They take your T cells, which are the soldiers of your immune system, and they extract them. In the lab, they genetically engineer them to have a special radar that spots a specific protein on the cancer cells. They grow millions of these super soldiers and infuse them back into the patient. The story of Emily Whitehead, a little girl with leukemia who had failed every other treatment, is heartbreaking and triumphant. She was the first child to get this. She nearly died from the immune reaction, the cytokine storm, but Carl June figured out how to calm it down. Today, she is cancer-free. These cells are living drugs. They stay in your body, patrolling for years.
A living drug. That is a wild concept. Okay, we have covered the repair kit, the diagnostics, the organ swaps, and the gene editing. Now I want to get into something the book calls the most complex idea. The Wnt pathway. Even the name sounds weird. WNT. What is it? And why does the book dedicate a whole chapter to a guy named Osman Kibar and his company BioSplice?
The Wnt pathway is fascinating because it is the master switch for our development. When you were an embryo, the Wnt pathway told your cells, you become an arm, you become a brain, start growing, stop growing. As adults, that pathway goes quiet, but diseases often hijack it. Cancer turns the volume up too high, causing uncontrolled growth. Degeneration, like arthritis, happens when the volume is too low and tissues die off. Osman Kibar and BioSplice have figured out how to modulate this pathway. Not just turn it on or off, but dim it to the exact right level.
So it is the Goldilocks effect. Not too hot, not too cold. They are testing this on arthritis, right? My knees kill me after a run. The idea of regrowing cartilage sounds impossible. Cartilage does not grow back. That is what every doctor says.
That is the old dogma. BioSplice has a drug currently in phase 3 trials called loricivivint. It is an injection into the knee. It tricks the remaining stem cells in the joint into thinking they are back in the embryonic stage. It tells them, make new cartilage. The early data suggests it actually regrows tissue, and because it targets that specific pathway, it doesn't seem to have systemic side effects. If this works, it could make knee replacements obsolete for millions of people.
If that works, I will be first in line. But let's bring it back to the present. Not everyone can get into a clinical trial for Wnt modulation or afford a trip to Panama for stem cells. The book has a section called What You Can Do Now. It covers pain management and lifestyle. I was interested in the pain part. Tony talks about something called the Egoscue method. It sounds like fancy stretching.
It is posture therapy. The idea is that pain is often a symptom of misalignment. If your hip is rotated, your knee hurts. Treat the knee, and the pain comes back. Fix the hip, and the pain goes away forever. It is low-tech, but effective. But for acute pain, Tony is a huge fan of PEMF. Pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. He calls it lightning in a box.
Lightning in a box. I looked this up. It basically uses magnetic fields to charge your cells? It sounds a bit woo-woo, Sarah.
It does, but the science is real. It is FDA approved for healing non-union bone fractures and treating depression. The theory is that it restores the electrical potential of the cell membrane, allowing waste out and nutrients in. It reduces inflammation. Tony uses it daily to manage the wear and tear of his crazy schedule.
And finally, we cannot ignore the basics. Diet. The book brings in Dean Ornish and Walter Longo. Ornish is the eat plants guy. Longo is the starve yourself guy. I am paraphrasing, of course.
You are, but you are close. Ornish proved that lifestyle changes alone can reverse heart disease and even lengthen telomeres. His mantra is, eat well, move more, stress less, love more. It is simple but powerful. Walter Longo advocates for fasting mimicking diets. He found that giving the body a break from food triggers autophagy. That is when your cells eat their own junk. They clean house. You don't have to starve forever, just periodic cycles of lower calories to trigger this cleanup mode. It is about metabolic flexibility.
So, to wrap this up, we have reviewed a massive amount of information. From stem cells in Panama to editing pig genes to fixing knees with molecular switches and simply eating more broccoli. It is overwhelming, but also hopeful. What is the main takeaway for you, Sarah?
The takeaway is agency. For most of history, health was something that happened to us. We got lucky or we got unlucky. Life Force argues that we are becoming the CEOs of our own health. We have the data, we have the tools, and we have the knowledge to intervene. You do not have to try every therapy in the book, but knowing they exist changes your mindset from passive to active. It is about staying healthy long enough to benefit from the cures that are coming tomorrow. It is about vitality, not just longevity.
Stay healthy long enough for the future to arrive? I like that. I might not go get a CCTA scan tomorrow, but I might think twice about that second donut. And I am definitely going to look up some posture exercises. Thanks for breaking this beast of a book down with me, Sarah.
My pleasure, Alex. And thank you all for listening to our program. Here is to your life force. See you next time.